VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. This is the February 24th edition. I'm here with Josh Frey. How's the week been, good my good man?
It's been good, other than the backbreaking snow moving that we've been doing the past couple of days. It's been a good week.
Yeah,
We're getting through
it
it.
comes with the territory. I had to do the same thing last night, although my snowblower fired up, so I was a happy man.
Oh, that's definitely helpful.
All right, well, let's level set a little bit. We are less than 9 weeks away from the NFL draft. Officially hit that little milestone this morning. And then free agency is about 2.5 weeks away. When we get to Monday, it'll be 2 weeks away because the NFL has the fancy titled legal tampering on the 13th. And then on the 15th, you can put ink to paper with a bunch of these dudes. And I think by most folks' estimation, the free agency class is impressive at cornerback and some of the less sexy guys who don't score touchdowns areas. So there's a lot of running backs, that's for sure. But wide receiver, it kind of feels like, oh, we're going to overpay. We know it. And maybe this guy will blossom into something. But that is a long setup because what you and I are talking about, primarily you with your five, are free agents that would make sense, external free agents for the 2023 Minnesota Vikings. I think the team has needs at cornerback, arguably WR2, certainly off-ball linebacker if they're going to divorce Jordan Hicks or Eric Kendricks. And then I always say interior defensive line because we're so content on employing Shamar Stephen or Jonathan Bullitt or Armin Watts. I would like to have an impact dude there. But that's setting the table to get to your list, good sir. We're going to go through the five men that you think is this going to be predictive, or you think that they should do this?
I think it's more that I think that they should do it. I don't know if necessarily they'll go after all five of these guys,
Mm-hmm.
but I would be very happy if they did. So it'll be
Okay.
more it's more my preference than predictive, I guess.
Okay, perfect. That's good to know because I think if it's predictive, you pull out a list of players that played for Brian Flores and you start to look for connections. Whereas if it's your preference in terms of how you think it would fit, then you can do your DJ Shark or Jamel Dean, any of those dudes that don't really have any ties to Kevin O'Connell or Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. So we're gonna count them down from 5 to 1. Spend about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes on each. At the bottom of your list, number five, who is it? What position does he play?
Well, number five, it's funny you bring up the Brian Flores connection because we're getting started right with that. I'm going linebacker Devin Bush here. I think he had a really tremendous rookie year,
Mm-hmm.
but past few seasons he had his ACL tear back in 2020. Past couple of years he's been a little bit on the downward turn, but he's only 25. He's definitely got some room to get back to where he was back in 2019. So I think you've already brought up they definitely need to improve the off-ball linebacker spot. If they want to go get a young guy that isn't part of the draft class, because I wouldn't say that the draft is necessarily chock full of guys that can probably be impact starters right away. And if those guys fly off the board right away, then if you have to go, I'd go get one of these guys in free agency. Devin Bush is a guy that you definitely could plug and play. Might take a little bit of time to get him up to speed, but he's a young guy. Probably get him on a cheap deal because of the last 2 years that he's had, and yeah, fills an immediate need.
When we say cheap, what are we thinking? Like 4 or 5 mil per season, or more or less?
Well, the market per value for him from Spotrac says 3 million. So
Okay.
we might get him at a nice little cheap deal there.
And and this one, our viewers should, etch in stone in their notepads because Flores coached this guy, a month and a half ago. So
Exactly.
yeah, the connection is vividly there and recent. So in theory, assuming Flores liked him, then it should be the relationship should script itself. So Devin Bush at number five, presumably pairing with Brian Asamoah. Is that what you're thinking?
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't be upset if they kept like Eric Hendricks around just because I definitely think he's a valuable, at least a veteran presence to keep in the locker room. Maybe you restructure that deal so he's not as expensive as he would have been. But I do think that eventually we're looking at a world where we're gonna have to move off of Kendricks at some point. And hey, if Bush shows some things this year, then maybe he's the guy that can do that.
One thing that's be interesting on this topic is depending on how many defensive veterans come back, is to see how right we were on these guys slowing down versus how poor Ed Donatell's system was. Because yesterday when Bobby Wagner was released, it was all the craze, like who's going to get him? And I'm like, he's in his, isn't he 32, 33? Why is he a huge commodity? Now, of course, he's probably a future Hall of Famer, but it doesn't seem like age mattered for him at all. But we have linebackers that are 30 and we're like, oh boy, they're over the hill. They can't play anymore. So in theory, if some of these guys, Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks, I guess Peterson didn't really slow down, but some of the guys that are on that age 30 precipice come back and then they're good and they don't seem so slow. Well, maybe it was the system that Ed Donatel had used. And I don't want to scapegoat him for everything because, the team went 13-4, but that's what I'll be looking for is how correct are we? Like, has Eric Kendricks really hit a wall? I know he's not as good as he was in 2020 when he was a god, but I guess we'll see because he'll play somewhere in 2023. All right, 5, Devin Bush, linebacker, pretty famous for the draft stock a few years ago. Who's number 4?
Number 4, I'm going to go wide receiver. I'm going to go McCall Hardman. I think he can be a really great speed threat opposite of Justin Jefferson in the slot, especially. He was on track to have a really great year in 2022 before he hit some injury problems. And I think he can just be a really dynamic receiver for you. We saw it down the stretch of the 2022 season. Some of the teams kind of started to figure out that if you double, triple team Justin Jefferson, you're going to get away with a lot of things from the other guys. So if you plug him in with a guy that can go 50 yards deep and Kirk can hit him, it's a lot harder to play that kind of defense on Justin Jefferson. And obviously they could go get this type of player in the draft too. There's a couple guys in the middle of rounds that I'd be looking at there. I wouldn't go break the bank for McCall Hardman or anything like that. But if you can go get him for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 million, maybe a little bit higher than that, I'd go do it.
Is your vision for this that Hardman would be the WR2 or just see how the chips fall and Osborne's WR2 and like what's your end game here? I mean, obviously you hope that he has 1,500 yards, the best thing ever. But what do you realistically think he would be on a September 4th depth chart?
I think probably looking at WR3 behind Osborne. I think it's obviously going to be probably JJ and then Hawkinson as the 2 top like targets for this team. But in terms of actual wide receiver, probably put him wide receiver 3 behind Jefferson and Osborne.
I'd like to point out your fascination too. I think about a month and a half ago, when we at Vikings territory put together a group article about fascinating, free agent go get 'ems. I think you had that dude from the Saints. Is it Deontay Hardy?
Yep, that's right.
So you want a home run hitter that's fast that can make a dent in defenses next to Jefferson. Is that correct?
That is very correct. Yeah, I think if the Vikings go get a guy that can like hit those home runs every once in a while, I think they're going to be a lot better suited because we saw it all year. Like they got off to really fast starts on offense, and then they sort of hit those third quarter walls where they just weren't able to put anything together. I think you go get a home run hitter like one of these guys, that becomes a lot easier to move the ball.
Bargain bin Tyreek Hill. I think that's the best way to go with it. All right, number 5, Devin Bush. Number 4, McCole Hardman from Kansas City Chiefs fame. Who is number 3?
Number 3, I'm gonna go back to linebacker.
Okay.
We already talked about him a little bit. Bobby Wagner.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
I do think that this is a guy that really, more than anything, he can change the culture on a defense. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's been to 2 of them. The Vikings last year didn't have a main starter that played in the Super Bowl. So I think that this could be a really big addition for them just in terms of the culture. And he hasn't really slowed down. Like he kind of went under the radar last year because the Rams were so bad. But I do think that he still can play. He recorded a career high in sacks last year. So he had 6 of them. And it's not like he's gone into it's not like he's garbage anymore. So yeah. I mean, he's going to be like 33, I think, next year. But if you go get him and he's not going to break the bank, I don't think. But if you can go get him for a cheapish mid-tier contract for 1 or 2 years just to try him out, see what happens, why not go do it? Because they've already talked about they want to be part of that championship pedigree. They harped on it throughout that entire postseason press conference. And if they really want to go do that, go get a champion.
And what a mentor for Brian Asamoah, even if it's for
exactly
a year or 2. Now, Wagner and O'Connell didn't cross paths at all, or did they?
I don't think they did.
because
Yeah,
Wagner
because
came.
this was his first year there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were supposed to, I guess, in theory, retool and make another push at it. The opposite happened, and he was the odd man out,
Yeah.
because, like, God, they just were so bad and nobody really expected it. No, there's sometimes a Super Bowl hangover, but not quite that egregious. All right, number 5, Devin Bush. Number 4, McCole Hardman. Number 3, Bobby Wagner, who's probably a Hall of Famer. And who's number 2?
Number 2, I'm trying to mix it up a little bit here. I'm going to go Connor McGovern, the
Mm-hmm.
center. He turns 30 this year, so maybe a little bit concerned about the age, but I'm
The
not.
offensive line, you don't really care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you look at Jason Kelsey, he's 35 and doing the thing that he's doing. So, yeah, I think Garrett Bradbury, he had a great turnaround this year, but is he going to be able to maintain that, or is this just like a flash in the pan sort of thing, like some of the other guys that we've talked about this offseason already? So I think if you go get a guy and you really want to improve that offensive line, again, turn to the Super Bowl, Kansas City and Philadelphia, two of the best offensive lines in the league. Jalen Hurts was able to do whatever he wanted behind that offensive line because they were just so big and powerful. And if you go get a guy like McGovern, who's pretty much improved every single year since he got drafted, I think that this is a no-brainer move.
And what is this one, about 7-8 mil per season, like the Bradbury's price tag, or a little bit more?
I think I'd go up to 10 if you
Okay.
wanted that much. But yeah, I do think that center is enough of a need because behind Bradbury, like you don't really have much in terms of true center position. Like they had the mismatch of players that they threw in last year, but I think that if you got to go get a real true center if you really want to compete.
Okay. And what I want to point out, and there'll probably be a separate show on this leading up to free agency, is that if Garrett Bradbury walks, I don't think anybody should be like, oh my God, because he felt so incredible in 2022 because he was not horrible. His pass blocking grade, according to Pro Football Focus, was 68.1, which is like, okay, pretty good.
Average.
Yeah. It's like, oh boy, because it wasn't in the 30s and 40s, we were like, yeah, they got the pick right, baby, in 2019. No, he was decent. And then he got hurt on top of it. And Chris Reed had to fill in and did a decent job in the game against the Bears. And then, no, Bradbury came back for the postseason game, didn't he?
Yep, he played
Yeah.
that
Okay.
postseason game. Wasn't
Yes.
very good, but
Yeah. Oh, no. Nobody in the middle of that line did Cousins any favors. But so Bradbury, yeah, if he does come back, you think like, all right, he'll grow with this coaching staff. If he leaves, then, it's like he probably wasn't worth the price tag because he wasn't a superstar in 2022. It just felt so unexpected that he was decent because in the past, and pass protection had been horrendous. So that's how my feeling on Bradbury. I'll take it or leave it. All right, so we're down to number 1, and this would be the one that you'd pound the table for the most if you worked in the Vikings front office. So hit us with it.
we're going back to the Steelers pool. I'm
Okay.
going cornerback Cam Sutton.
Ooh, all right.
I think if they want to go out and get somebody in free agency, improve that secondary, it's got to be this guy. He continues to get better every single year. He turns 28 next year, which like you might not want to put him on like a 5-year deal or something like that, but he's still 5 years younger than Patrick Peterson is, and he's still improving. So I think if you want to go get a press corner that can go win these one-on-one battles, we've talked about it so often with Brian Flores' defense, you're probably going to need at least one of those guys that can do that for you. And Cam Sutton is a guy that one has played for Brian Flores already, not necessarily the exact position that he was coaching, but
Mm-hmm.
I do, yeah, but he is a guy that can go win these battles. He's super physical corner, and I love watching him play, and it'd be awesome to see him in purple next year.
So the Flores connection strikes twice, which isn't weird at all, especially for a task like this, because as much as a cliche as it is, whether it's in coaching or it's personnel, ties in sports are so damn important, especially in coaching. It's like a big club where you just pull the strings of who used to play for you or coach for you. I'll ask you on VikingsTerritory.com yesterday. I asked everybody to predict the starting cornerbacks, and you predicted Sutton, and you're true on brand here. But then you had a Caleb Evans as the CB2, so to speak, on the outside for week 1 of 2023. I don't have a beef with that, but I want to know, where was Duke Shelley? Is he on the team, or is he going to go try it out with some other team?
Somewhere else, honestly. I think that the Vikings have a lot of guys that that have been pretty much the exact same thing that Duchelle has been for most of his career, other than the final 8 games of
Yeah.
2022. So I think that he'd probably go somewhere else. Maybe try to get Andrew Booth a few more snaps if he can actually stay healthy. And I wrote about this today too over on Purple PTSD. Keep an eye on Tay Gowan.
Yeah.
He's a guy that 2021 NFL draft I had my eyes on. He went in the 6th round. Hasn't really gotten much playing time to this point in his career, but he's a guy that I'd keep an eye on as training camp gets closer.
And if I'm not mistaken, he doesn't quite fit the CB1 stuff, but Kalon Barnes is supposed to be like a top 3 fastest player in the NFL, right?
Yeah. Its 40 time is like 4.24 or something like that. I think it is like 3rd or 4th top best in the entire combine history. I don't put too much stock into that because you look at that entire list, like the top 20 or whatever, all the guys that are under. They're all the guys under 4.3 is like there's one guy that's actually turned into something. John Ross has been like the best out of those entire guys. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that, but I keep an eye on him too.
And even Ross is a humongous flop by draft pundits. All right, number 5 was Devin Bush, a linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 4 was Mecole Hardman, who was supposed to replace Tyreek Hill, who was supposed to. Tyreek Hill got embroiled in stuff, and like that weekend they drafted Mecole Hardman, in my opinion, as a contingency plan. He's number 4 for you. Number 3 was Bobby Wagner from the Los Angeles Rams, most famously known for his Seahawks time. Connor McGovern, center for the Cowboys, right?
Jets.
Isn't there a Connor? Who am I?
There is one for the Cowboys too.
Oh, okay, that's what trips me up. So I know in my head that one of them's good and one of them's not, and I just assumed that you wanted the good one.
Yep, that's the one.
And then number 1 is probably the most popular early free agency Vikings consensus because of the Flores connection and the roster need for cornerback, Cameron Sutton. And I think also he fits into the Vikings budget where he could be got for 7-8 million. And, he's right in the prime of his career. Plus the team needs cornerbacks if they don't believe Booth, Evans, or Dantzler are sure things. All right, that's quite the list, sir. I'm hoping to see at least 1, maybe 2 come to fruition. When we come back next Wednesday, I think maybe I can do my list, or maybe we can explore some more free agency stuff because it's coming in a hurry, and it's always so damn exciting because it is the first piece of the puzzle personnel-wise to figure out what your team, in this case the Vikings, wants to do in the upcoming season. Any closing arguments, sir, for this week?
Let's get to free agency. I'm sick of sitting on my hands waiting for this thing to get here. I need it to come faster.
Yep. By the time we talk, it'll be, less than 2 weeks away. So, all right, man, you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to everybody else next Monday. Skol, baby.